Hello. How are you?
I'm perfectly good, and I'm very happy to spend some time with you. First of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. William Lee, who, um, for me, what attracts me to what you're doing and what you talk about is the harnessing of the power of our bodies to heal. I think that phrase about you is piquing my interest, of course, as always, but you really are a pioneer in this. And I think everyone listening is really looking forward to what we can learn from you. Can you give us a little background on who you are, what you've been doing to bring us up to the conversation?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. William Lee. I'm a physician. I trained in internal medicine, which means that I take care of all people, men and women, young and old, healthy and sick. And as a doctor, my own personal goal has always been to try to keep people sitting on the pillar of their own health. And this is a little bit different than how we're trained as doctors, which is to focus on disease and how to treat disease. So my role as a background, I bring right into this as a physician. I bring to the table. I'm also a research scientist. I've spent the last 30 some years working in a field called vascular biology. Vascular just means blood vessels. And the reason that I study a field called angiogenesis, angio is blood vessels, genesis is how they grow. The reason it's important is because we all have 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels packed inside our adult bodies. And
Wow.
these blood vessels are the highways and byways for the oxygen that we breathe, and also the nutrients that we eat. The blood vessels deliver the things to every cell and every organ. And as somebody who's worked as an advocate to use this science of the circulation to improve the modern medical treatment of diseases like cancer, vision loss, blindness, diabetes, and wounds that don't heal. This is a problem as people get older. These are all diseases of aging, so to speak. They keep us from aging in a healthy way. I've been involved with the successful development of 44 new FDA-approved treatments for cancer, vision loss, and diabetes. And it's really that kind of street cred and that experience that I started to realize something, which was that to treat disease is a little too late. And what we should really be able to do is intercept the horse before it gets out of the barn. And that's prevention. And when you talk about prevention, you really shouldn't talk about drugs that are expensive, not accessible to everyone who needs them, and also have side effects and toxicities. But you can actually talk about food. And that's something that is available. Everyone needs to eat. It's safe. And it's really central. Food is central to who we are as humans. It's part of our humanity. And I'm a foodie. I like to cook. I've traveled all around the world. I lived in Italy and in Greece before. And so to me, and my background is Chinese. And so I have this sort of Mediterranean sensibility about food. So what I did about 15 years ago is began using the same systems that we develop drugs, biotech drugs, very fancy, sophisticated cancer treatments. And we began throwing foods into the same system. And it's something that people hadn't thought about doing before, keep drugs in their own silo, keep foods in
Right.
their own silo. And I crossed that to start mixing and matching. And I will tell you, Norma, that the big jaw-dropping surprise that I personally had that led me to where I am today is that 50% of the foods that we were studying in these drug development systems were as or more powerful than the drugs that we were studying. So that's food is medicine. I sometimes refer to myself jokingly as sort of one of the OGs in the food is medicine space. But that gave me passion because while I'm still involved with developing serious biotech solutions for cancer, the reality is that something about food that we discover has immediacy. If I told you something about a fruit or a vegetable today, after your listeners hear this, they could put it into action right away. And so I wrote two New York Times bestselling books, Eat to Beat Disease and Eat to Beat Your Diet. Both of these talk about not just foods like eat this and eat that, although that's in there. I have more than a list of 300 foods that are in there. But what I really wanted to be able to bring my audience, the readership, and people listening to this podcast is that modern science teaches us how our body responds to what we put inside it. When we put something bad inside it, it's going to respond in a negative way. It's going to lower our defenses, lower our shields against disease. And when we make better choices to put things that are good for our body responds by raising our shields. Our health defenses are activated. Our metabolism is improved. And the power to live better, healthier lives across the entire lifespan is inside us. We need to start with who we are.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, the reverse can happen as quickly if you have a lot of sugar or you drink. I'm not an pro-alcohol person, but if you drink enough alcohol, you will physically feel ill. I mean, you can tell the reverse very quickly. Yep. One of the things, I'm totally in your camp. I'm 78 and I really believe in trying to take ownership as much as I can for my own destiny. And food obviously is a big part of that. And one of the things that I would love to hear is if I've done this with some friends where I've gone into their kitchens, into the cabinet, and it's like, they say, I don't know what to do. I don't feel good. I want to lose weight. And it's like, trust me, let me go in your cabinets and in your refrigerator and throw out what you should never have there ever again. And then let's go shopping for the staples you should always have. And if you want to have ice cream one day or something like that, never do it in your house because that's your sacred place. Never do the bad things in your house. So if you were to be with a friend who is just tearing it up with as much junk as you could possibly imagine, and you've just cleaned out his or her cabinets and refrigerator, what are 10 ingredients, foods, whatever, that you would say they should have as staples in their home? So at any time, whenever they're hungry, nothing can go wrong. They're doing it. They'll be able to do it right. What would they be? Start with you could do any order, but I would love your 10 tips and best food to have in the house.
Sure. Well, look, first of all, I'm a researcher, so I happen to know I can come up with 10 things, but importantly, I happen to know what's in each of those 10 things that science has discovered that helps our body respond by having better circulation,
awesome.
Better stem cells for regenerating from the inside out, better gut health, antioxidant power to protect our DNA, lowering inflammation or raising our immunity to protect us from infection or even for cancer inside our body. So why don't we start at the top?
Definitely. I'm so excited.
And by the way, I stepped into this podcast having just gone into my fridge and my pantry to pull out something that I could whip together to have a little bit of a quick lunch before we came on. So I just went through this.
Practice makes perfect. So we want to know what that was.
Okay. Well, so let's start with the things that I actually did.
Okay.
I had in my fridge that came from my pantry some tubes of double concentrated tomato paste. This is a great way to add umami flavor while capturing the polyphenols and the carotenoids, the lycopene of tomatoes in ultra concentrated form. Okay. I buy the Italian kind because they don't add anything like sugar or anything. It's just pure concentrate.
Right. So basically look for tomato paste that doesn't have sugar, because a lot of those
Correct.
tomatoey things do add
That's right.
sugar. So
Always look
good tip. That's
at
a good
the
tip.
always look at the ingredient list for
Yeah.
anything that I'm talking
Yeah.
about, because there's all these hidden ingredients that you need to, if you can't pronounce it, you probably don't want to put it in your body.
Right.
So, tube of tomato paste. Now, I actually love to use things that can pop up umami flavor. So, so a couple of things that are in my fridge that can help pop up that nice mouth watery feeling. I have a little tube also of anchovy paste. Anchovies actually are a great source of
I
omega-3
love
fatty acids,
anchovies.
right? It's like the gem of the Mediterranean, the
I
secret
love,
in the sauce, so to speak. And a little tube of this allows you to squeeze a drop out or squeeze a little bit out, and you can just stir it in a little bit
yeah,
out of my pantry, extra virgin olive oil.
of
Okay.
course.
Now, extra virgin olive
I sell olive oil. So I love, yeah.
I'm gonna hit you up and see if we can actually I can play with it because I like to cook. Extra
Yeah.
virgin olive oil is great because it contains polyphenols from the olives, and one of the most powerful polyphenols is called hydroxytyrosol. Now, don't worry about the fancy chemical names. Just know that people like me have studied this. It's in the extra virgin olive oil because it comes from the little bits that are still in the extra virgin form, hasn't been filtered out. And when we eat that, it actually lowers inflammation. It improves our circulation. It even can cut off the blood supply and starve cancer. And all you need is a healthy fat to cook with. So a little olive oil, a little.
I'm gonna add a little tip, olive oil tip, because that's my thing. So in November and December, the new harvest is happening, and we get our shipment of olive oil in. I have an orchard that does a special blend for us. And so what I recommend is typically there's one harvest and that gets sold for an entire year, sometimes for 2 years, which I absolutely, don't love. I think the fresher, the better, the higher potency. So when you buy olive oil in November or December from the new harvest, get extra bottles. If you like a certain brand, get a few of them and put them in the refrigerator until you're ready to use them, because it's cold and dark. And what does that do? It keeps it fresh. So when you're ready to go to that next bottle, if you use as much as I do, you will have it as if it was just harvested. It'll keep it fresh, keep the color, keep the essence, keep all of those beautiful, wonderful things that are good for us. So that's my little hack on olive oil.
What an amazing tip. We normally think about keeping it in a cool, dark place, but the refrigerator is a perfect place to keep it, right?
Yeah. And you can also put olive oil in a dish and keep it in the refrigerator, and it's sort of like butter. You can spread it and you can use it that way as well.
Yeah, right. It kind of turns into a semi-solid.
Yeah, it's great. And it's more concentrated. So you like tubes and everything for cooking. You can do a tablespoon from that and have like enough.
Fantastic tips. I love that. I'm learning something even as we get started. So we talked about tomato paste, anchovy paste, extra virgin olive oil. I always have a little chili pepper flakes. And the reason is that chili pepper flakes contain capsaicin. This is the natural chemical in peppers that light up your tongue. They give you the zing. And it turns out more recent research shows that when your tongue gets that zing, it's an activation. It's like a trigger that sends a message to your brain. Your tongue will text message your brain when you actually eat chili pepper flakes or any chili, like sriracha sauce will do the same thing. And it text message your brain. It helps your brain release a hormone, noradrenaline. And this noradrenaline will go down the nerves from your brain down the side of your neck. You can feel it next time you eat chili. you'll feel the tingle go down, and as a hormone is released, and that hormone will activate your body's brown fat. Now, brown fat is a very healthy form of body fat. It's not lumpy bumpy. It's not the muffin top. It's not in your thighs, not in your butt. It's actually
Right.
wafer thin and close to the bone. And what brown fat does when it's turned on, it acts like the burner on a gas range. You know, you go click, 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 whoosh. And when you turn on your brown fat with chili peppers and other foods as well, including tomatoes, what it does is it burns down extra energy. It burns down extra calories, extra fat in your body, and it burns away harmful body fat. So a little extra zing helps you, even if, by the way, even if you are a thin bodied person, a lean person, you can still have extra body fat in the tube of your body.
Yeah.
That's called skinny fat.
Yeah.
And this is one of the,
that's a good one.
that's a tip, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good one. I keep capers. I keep dried beans. I keep I keep tins of seafood, different kinds of seafood,
like sardines.
Sardines,
Yeah,
mackerel.
I'm a big, yeah.
And by the way, a lot of people, this is me as well. When I was a kid, my mom would take me into the middle aisles of the grocery store, and there'd be all this tuna fish. And when we opened one up, I thought that looks like cat food. It smelled like cat food. And so it really turned me off until I actually lived in the Mediterranean for a while. Italy, Greece, south of France, Portugal, a long tradition of exquisitely cooked and tinned fish, packed in olive oil and all these other herbs and things. And they are beautiful to keep as really a whole meal. You can have a whole lunch.
I agree. As we all are trying to really get the right amount of protein, and it's so much more than what we think we need. And, one of my favorite things is to put tons and tons of fresh lemon on sardines, big sardines. I like the ones that are in the jars. Put tons of lemon on it, and it's just so delicious. And you could put a little anchovy or capers and things like that on it. And one jar is like the most incredibly perfect amount of a meal where you just get that power of some protein, and it's delicious. It's totally delicious.
Absolutely. It sounds like you and I could fix a quick lunch together and have this conversation and really have a lovely meal. So, a couple of other things that I like to have in my pantry.
Excuse me, you need to know about the dried beans.
Oh, yes.
Well, so tell me a little bit about that, because I'm not a big bean person other than chickpeas, but give us some ideas for beans.
So beans are one of the core staple foods that's a common denominator in all of the planet's blue zones. These are the locations around the world that my friend Dan Buettner first kind of put out to the public as areas where people live long and live healthy as they age. And, people have been searching, what's the secret to it? Well, they have community. Well, they actually have physical activity. Well, they have lower stress. And also they eat great food they eat together. All right. So all these things count. There's no one magic food that's a silver bullet, but beans is a common denominator. Now, what's in a bean? Okay. Beans actually contain a huge amount of vitamins and minerals that our body needs. But more importantly, it's a good source of dietary fiber and an inexpensive source of protein. Beans can travel long distances if they're dried. If you go back 2,000 years back to the Silk Road that connected China through the Middle East to the Mediterranean, beans were one of the things that they could dry and put on camelback, right? So it's a revered 1,000-year-old tradition. Okay, so dietary fiber in beans is very important for gut health. It's one of the easiest way to get gut health. If you get beans and you soak them for 24 hours before you cook them, you'll actually degrade some of the phytic acid, which, people like to say they don't have as much of this natural protective chemical the beans use to protect themselves. Just get all that stuff away. And then you wind up softening the bean. It's faster to cook. You can cook beans. You can stew them in lots of different ways. You can make soup out of them. Bottom line, when you have good gut health, you have whole body health. Our gut bacteria, which is 39 trillion bacteria in our body. By the way, we've got about 40 trillion human cells, and we've got 39 trillion bacteria.
Wow. That's amazing. That's a good one. Haven't heard that one.
And by the way, so you and I and everyone watching this, we are not only human. We actually are partly bacteria as we walk around in our beautiful garb. And there's a term for organisms that are made of two different things. All right. Part human, part bacteria. And that term is a holobiont, HOLOBIONT. So although you can call us human, we're really holobionts because we walk around with about 50% of us being bacteria. Now, our bacteria, look, I went to medical school. When I went to medical school, bacteria were the bane of our existence. Got to memorize them, got to kill them with antibiotics. Now we realize that most of the bacteria that we encounter as humans across our lives, most of them are good and most of them live inside us.
Yeah.
And when our bacteria do? They actually lower inflammation in our body. They boost our immune system. And they text message our brain to release social hormones. So there's one bacteria, and this is the beginning of a whole new era of research, but we're beginning to discover certain bacteria. So for example, there's a bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri. Lactobacillus reuteri is actually a normal gut bacteria, but it's also used to make sourdough bread. In fact, the lactic acid from lactobacillus is what gives the tang to the bread. It's also, by the way, used as the natural starter for Parmigiano Reggiano cheese from Italy.
Yeah.
Right? It's also found in some yogurts. And guess what researchers have found? And I did some of the research myself with a colleague at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that Lactobacillus reuteri not only improves your immune system, but it text messages your brain. And what it does is that it helps your brain release social hormones like oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is what is released from your brain when you go to the airport and you see a friend or relative you haven't seen for a long time. You run up to them and give them a big hug, right?
Yeah.
It's the same hormone that your brain releases when you get a kiss. Not a peck in the cheek, but a French kiss, a deep kiss. That feel-good hormone. And it's the same hormone, social hormone, that your brain floods for microseconds when you have an orgasm. So
what are the foods?
Well,
it's the Parmesan cheese.
Parmesan cheese, a sourdough bread also contains this. Yogurt can contain this, and you can also find dietary supplements. I mean, the bottom line is that everything in moderation.
Yeah.
I don't want people to rush out to eat lots of cheese that has salt and saturated fats.
Yeah.
A little bit. We were just talking about a jar of sardines, and we were talking about some little bit of tomato paste. Everything in moderation is actually better for not only your soul, but actually for your body as well.
Yeah.
So that's one example of a good bacteria, but there's many other ones.
Yeah, that's a great one. And so what's your favorite bean dish? Because that's other than popcorn. It's like and chickpeas. What's your favorite bean dish?
I love so many different dishes, but the one that this conversation is bringing to mind instantly is there is a giant bean dish. It's the giant bean. They call them gigantes in Greece, and it's a very rustic peasant dish. They take big Greek. They're like giant. It's not fava beans. They're big white beans, giant white beans, and they soak them. They cook them slowly in olive oil, onions, a little bit of tomato sauce, and some oregano. And they just stew it down. Mm. It's a little side dish that if you have a nice side of freshly made sourdough bread, and and your jar of sardines. What an amazing kind
Yeah,
of quick lunch you can
that's
have.
great.
You can always imagine yourself on vacation.
That's so great. I love that. I like that suggestion. Um, so what else is
All
in
right.
that pantry? These are so amazing, by the way. They're not typical. They're very innovative suggestions. I know you're saying to yourself, I'm a doctor. I've done all this research and she's asking me about my friends, but this is so, practical and, and it does empower us, and the suggestions are very, innovative, I think, compared to the typical salmon,
All right. Here's
Okay.
another one.
Whatever else, we're ready.
I always have a few jars or bags of capers. Capers are the little flower buds that come from rocky Mediterranean islands, usually Sicily, some Pantelleria,
Pantelleria, yeah.
yeah, and Santorini is another place off of Greece. They pick these things off of the cliffs. They pack them with sea salt, or they brine them with a little bit of vinegar, and they can keep for a long time in your pantry. And you soak them up. You want to wash off all the vinegar or all the salt, and you just chop them up. And you can sprinkle them onto a fish dish, a chicken dish, a salad. They really light up your taste buds. And the reason that they light up your health as well is they have something called quercetin, natural chemical that's super anti-inflammatory, which is really the root cause. Inflammation is the root cause of so many diseases of aging. And so if you want to actually age well over time and eat well over time, I recommend keeping a little jar of capers. And by the way, so people might listen to say, you know what? I don't even know what a caper is. If I bought one, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Here's what I say, Norma. In today's world, I really encourage exploration of foods that are good for you that you might not know about. No problem.
Yeah.
If you get a cell phone, type in caper, type in recipe, hit search on Google, and then hit video.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to teach you passionately what they do with those capers and show you in their kitchen how to do it. No excuse.
And the point is, the suggestions you're making, when people go shopping, if they have a list of things that are all going to be good for them and they have them in the house and they come up with some recipes, you can't go wrong. If you have junk in your house, you're going to not feel good. And, I'm in the fashion beauty world, and I use my communication. It's like, if you want to look pretty, you got to be healthy, because if you're not healthy, you're not going to look pretty. You're not going to feel good, right?
100%. Here's a couple of other ones. I keep some dark chocolate, like 80% cacao or higher.
Yeah.
Because although chocolate itself is a confection, the cacao, the higher percent cacao you have, that's a plant-based food that comes from a tree. It's a berry. Eventually, a friend of mine shipped me some cacao pods from Miami.
Yeah. Wow.
They're heavy. They're like a football size. You cut
Really?
them open, you can shake them, and you can hear the beans rattling inside it.
Wow.
Open, and they're like lychees. It's a nut with a white rim of flesh around it, and you can actually eat it. Like the cacao fruit is nicely kind of sweet, sour, really quite interesting. You want to peel that stuff up, and then you just ferment it, and then you can roast it. But don't do the work yourself. Just buy a tin, or a little bag of dark chocolate powder or bits.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful because the proanthocyanidin, again, don't worry about the chemical name, but just know that we discovered this in dark chocolate. When we eat it, that chemical causes our body to respond by releasing stem cells. You can double the number of stem cells from your bone marrow that regenerate your circulation, regenerate your heart, regenerate your brain.
I love that.
Right?
That's good.
So what do you eat the dark chocolate with, right? So, and by the way, one of the things you don't want to be keeping in your pantry, I know a lot of people do this, is Halloween candy, right? So just get rid of that stuff. But the dark chocolate's great. What do? I like to add it to another one of my pantry ingredients, which is coffee beans.
Wow.
Coffee. Now, let me tell you what I do with coffee and why it's good for you. Coffee is one of the original beverages of the world that's found across different cultures.
Yeah.
It's very ancient. And coffee has something called chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid actually is good for your stem cells, starves cancer by cutting off the blood supply, slows the aging of your cells. You can actually gain years at the cellular level by drinking coffee regularly every day. Now, I recommend not adding dairy to it. Don't add sugar to it.
Right.
Forget about the stuff when you in a drive-by, you get that pumpkin spice seasonal stuff. Look, that's all artificial flavorings that they squirt in there. All right.
It's awful. Yeah.
Right. So, but the real deal has chlorogenic acid, and it really slows your cellular aging. Like, who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
At any age, you get more vibrancy.
Right.
So one little tip. I listen. You and I are like just ping
We're
pong.
the tipsters.
Yeah. So here's the thing. You want to, if you can, buy organic coffee. You know why? Because the organic coffee not only doesn't have the pesticides sprayed on it, but research has discovered that organic coffee has more chlorogenic acid. You get more of the good stuff, not just less of the bad stuff, but more of the good stuff. Now, here's why. And this is not well known by people, but by researchers, we know this now. It turns out that in Mother Nature, obviously coffee plants in the wild will live with nature. So there's little insects that nibble on the leaves and the stems. The plant responds to that nibbling by the insects as wounding. And as a wound healing response, the plant makes more chlorogenic acid.
Right.
When you actually have natural residents around the plant nibbling at the leaves and stems, coffee bean will have more chlorogenic acid.
Stronger.
When you spray it with pesticides, guess what? No injury, no pests, no nibbling, less chlorogenic acid. Want the good stuff?
Yeah.
You get organic.
Yeah, I agree. I was, for many years, I drink lots of green tea. I love Japanese green tea. And so I was staying away from coffee, and then I obviously read very much of what you were saying. And so I thought, I'm going to have coffee in the morning, and start my day with the coffee. And one of the things that I think is a tip is that I would say after 12 noon or 2 o'clock, it may be the time to kind of basta on the caffeine so you can get a good night's sleep. But I agree with you. And I also agree the chocolate, I get as much of, the darkest. I put it in my refrigerator. And when you're working and you're mindless and you just have to get up to kind of distract yourself, and you go to the refrigerator. So I'll take a little square from the chocolate, and it like does the trick. And whatever my wandering to distract myself I'll get something to eat. It's the perfect thing. And it's so powerful that you feel like done. I'm good.
And that's the key. You don't need very much to give yourself that hit of health power.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that I think is really important to remember. We never want to eat too much of anything, even good things, things that are few. Moderation is really the key to life. You mentioned tea. That's also in my pantry.
Yeah.
I love tea. Green tea is one of my favorites. One of the things that was really interesting is that we did a study assuming to look at the cancer fighting power of tea. And we assumed that green tea would, of course, be better. We also assumed that Japanese tea would be better than any other green tea. And it turned out we learned all kinds of surprises. First of all, the surprise is that matcha, which is a Japanese powdered tea, it's a whole tea leaf powder.
That's great.
Is really powerful because you get the dietary fiber from the entire leaf. Good for your gut health. And by the way, people in England have actually studied this. Turns out that matcha in the lab kills breast cancer stem cells. These are the little tiny stem cells that can help breast cancer come back. We don't have a medicine. We don't have a drug out there that can actually do that. But Mother Nature has it. that we can actually in the form of matcha.
Mm.
It's really quite
Yeah.
amazing. We looked at Japanese sencha. We looked at Chinese jasmine tea, both quite powerful.
Yeah.
We found that when you blend those two teas together, now culturally, you would never find a Japanese tea blender working with Chinese jasmine. But I'm just telling you, we live in a new world of creativity, right?
Yeah.
We're a global community. Yeah. You mix them together. Our research shows you get 1 + 1 = 3. You get synergism. You get an even more powerful effect. And then what we found that was really surprising, because we had assumed that black teas would not be that good for you because they're oxidized and, all the stuff must be good, stuff must be gone. Wrong. Gray, which is a traditional English tea, really, really powerful for your circulation. Helps mobilize your stem cells for regeneration. And then here's like a jaw dropper. If you are a tea aficionado, you may have heard of this tea called pu'er, P-U''ERH, pu'er. It's actually the name of a tiny village in southwestern China. But this is a digestive tea. It's a smoky, ultra fermented tea. And this has been discovered to improve gut health by it's a probiotic food because it actually contains its own healthy gut bacteria. Yeah. It's called pu'er-psyllid. And so it's actually
I have heard of it. The other good thing about matcha is, especially the powder, and some of them come in little packets, so it's easy to use them, is putting matcha in other things. Really is a lot of fun too. And,
what do you put it in?
Well, you know what? I put it in, I make a nut seed bread. That's not bread. It's just nuts and seeds and, psyllium holding it all together. And I love bread, but I've replaced my hunger for bread with this bread. It is so dense and rich and filled with nutrition. And when you toast it, it's beyond. You can have it frozen in the freezer for a long time. But I put matcha in there too. And it gives it just a little, with the nuts and the seeds, it just gives it this little edge that's really nice. And, but I think creative people can take that powder and put it into smoothies and everything. I mean, it's a given. But I love the fact that all teas really have this potent benefit. It's great that you expanded that idea of tea. It's really wonderful. I have, a tea blend for sleep that, really works for some reason. It's sort of a typical, blend of the usual suspects in tea. And then I have just amped up the tea, that I've done for friends of mine. A lot of these high powered people that travel and are on planes all the time and they can't sleep. So I've been giving it to them and it's working. So I've just amped it up by putting in these French lavender buds that are beautiful. And the tea smells like, the best lavender from France. And in 30 minutes, you are out and you have this great night's sleep. And the scent, just smelling it while you're in that I need to go to sleep mode is really great. Teas are really quite special.
I love that you blended sort of this, the lavender, because lavender actually has been studied as well. There's a chemical in it called perylene. It's a kind of a natural alcohol, but it actually has been shown in the lab to actually cause relaxation. It causes your cortisol levels to actually fall. It causes your adrenaline levels to fall. Yeah. So it makes total sense. And by the way, I did some research this past summer. I went to Salt, which is a tiny little village in Provence. Yeah. And I was out in the lavender fields, the bees are buzzing
Yes.
around, and you're in the middle of this thing, and actually you're relaxed just
Right.
walking,
Just being there.
just being there. It
Yeah.
relaxes you. So again, this is sort of this tie-in from nature. And lavender, by the way, obviously it's, wonderful when it's fresh, but most people don't spend time, wandering around lavender fields. But you can get it dried, and that can be in your pantry as well.
Yeah.
I think we probably hit 10, but we could probably keep on going.
No, but you know what? I just really appreciate your take on it and the background about each and the value of each. I would love to go back to the angiogenesis part of your introduction. I don't think we know enough about that, and you really know a lot about it. So can you give us some information about what you're looking at when it comes to health in that way, and what we should know?
Yeah. Well, look, angiogenesis is how our body grows blood vessels, and our circulation, I mentioned, really represent the highways and byways for health. When our blood vessels are healthy, all the rest of our body can be healthy. When our blood vessels are sick, not a chance that we can actually have complete health. All right. And so that's how important our blood vessels are. In fact, the other reason that they're important is that it's the first organ in our body, our circulation, to form. So when your dad's sperm met your mom's egg, and they got together and formed a little ball of cells, and those cells started to become the future you, the first organ that gets formed that you can recognize is your circulation. That's like numero uno thing that we formed at the very beginning of life. So that tells you how important this particular set, the function actually is of bringing blood flow. The circulation is also quite amazing. You need to have, there's a lining of our blood vessels. So if you think about like a dress that you're making, you're going to actually line it with something often, right? And so blood vessels are created the same way. There's an outer casing, and that's what we would see if you saw a blood vessel, but there's an inner lining that is very, very satiny smooth. Right. It's so smooth. It's like an ice skating rink after the Zamboni cleaned it up. And so you can actually skate very smoothly on it. That lining is really important because there's blood cells that float through there, and they need to be able to flow. Good blood flow is good health. Now, when you actually have damage to that lining, it's like having a rip or tear in the lining of your outfit. It can snag on something, and the snag in your bloodstream that snags on are blood cells or platelets that can cause clotting. And when your blood clots, you can have a stroke, you can have a pulmonary embolus, you can have a heart attack. It's dangerous. And in fact, one of the things we're beginning to discover now is that COVID, with this crazy thing we just went through, in some people can damage the lining of their blood vessels, damages that slip, which is why we start seeing higher rates of unexpected heart disease and stroke, heart attacks in some people. Fortunately, not most people. However, this lining is incredibly important to preserve. So what are the things that we can do to help preserve that lining? Well, obviously, regular exercise is important. Lowering stress puts less stress on that lining. High stress, when your blood is pumping hard because you're worried, anxious, pissed off, it causes shear stress. It's like taking sandpaper over that slip lining. It's going to rough it up, and that's going to be trouble for you later on. So that's why chilling out, finding ways to chill is actually really important.
Yeah.
Sleep, also critical, because when we're sleeping, our stem cells help to rebuild the damaged lining of the blood vessels as well. So we want to get good quality sleep, but food is really, really important. So there are certain foods that can help you rebuild the lining. Blueberries help us rebuild the lining of our blood vessels. Very important for health. Kiwis do that as well. The stuff that's in leafy greens, broccoli, bok choy, broccoli rabe, cabbage, it all actually helps to realign it. Chocolate, the dark chocolate cacao helps us realign our blood vessels. Tea also helps us reface, like the substances in these foods are like that Zamboni that is on the ice skating rink. For those people who are listening who aren't familiar with this, if you've ever been ice skating in your life, you know that when at the beginning of a session, the ice is completely smooth. And you can throw a sweater across the rink and it'll go all the way across to the other end. But after you get 20, 30, 100 people skating on it for, in Rockefeller Center, after like an hour of it, what will happen is that the ice is all roughed up. Now, if you throw a sweater, it just stays right there. So what happens is you have a little truck called a Zamboni that comes up. It's heated and it melts the surface to keep it nice and smooth all over again. And that's what the foods that we can eat can do. They can help our circulation get smooth once again. Now, that's just the lining of the blood vessels. Our body uses our blood vessels as a health defense system. So not too many, not too few blood vessels, but just the right amount to feed all of our organs. If you don't have enough blood vessels, enough blood flow, your wounds won't heal. If you have surgery or a cut, it just won't heal. This is a problem in people who get older or with diabetes. It's also an issue that can cause heart attack or stroke or organ damage. Now, so what do we want to do? We want to eat foods that can help to nurture more blood vessels to help our body grow more where it needs to. It's kind of like putting grass seed onto a golf course or a country club in order to make that lawn look perfectly smooth. Our body can do that. And foods can actually make it grow even faster. So what are some of those foods that can actually do it? Barley can actually help. Apples, an apple peel can actually, if you eat fruit peel, it can help our blood vessels grow where it needs to. And because our body's smart, it will never allow more blood vessels to grow when you use food than it needs. It just keeps it right where it is. Okay. On the other hand, there are certain diseases that are very, very diabolical. Cancer being one of them. And with cancer, look, we form cancers in our body all the time, and our immune system wipes them out. So never is a problem. But occasionally, a tiny little cancer cell will hijack our blood supply, because without a blood supply, it can't grow. It's about it can only get to the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen without a blood supply. Once it hijacks blood vessels, and I studied this in an angiogenesis lab, the tumor can grow 16,000 times in just 2 weeks. It is literally a trigger, that explosive trigger for tumor growth. So our body wants to naturally starve cancers by cutting off the blood supply. Foods can do it as well. What are some of the foods? We talked about some of them already. Tomatoes, green tea, broccoli, strawberries, blueberries dark chocolate can all help starve cancer by cutting off the blood supply. What is that like? Well, we talked about the country club. If you've got too many, the grass is growing too high in some areas. It's like too many blood vessels. In the club, they would just mow the lawn and get it right back to where it needs to. Our body will mow the lawn, so if there's any extra blood vessels, it will trim them down, starve the cancer naturally. However, we can eat foods that can boost that big time. And this is where I was talking about looking at that combination of green tea, Japanese, and jasmine tea, the black teas. All of them can actually help your body achieve this effect. And so coffee in the morning is good for a wake up, slow down cellular aging, good for anti-inflammation, good for your metabolism. Flip over to tea. It's a little kinder, gentler, sort of on the brain and on the nerves. And now you're actually doing cancer starving, and also relining the circulation. And this is what the field of angiogenesis is all about. How do we keep that natural balance of blood flow so that we can actually be healthy our whole lives?
Yeah, that's a really helpful visual. I have a quick question on, so in my office, in the past 2 weeks, we have had a good amount of COVID. And today, one department just called in sick. And so, I've heard, different things about people who were taking vitamin D3 in good quantities might have had a little edge and certain things. But from a food perspective, I mean, other than the basic immune boosting, is there anything that I mean, maybe it's nothing, but is there any insight that you might have had, that might be helpful that we could empower ourselves, with?
Yeah. Well, look, anything that boosts our immune system helps us resist any type of infection, invaders from the outside. So
Yeah.
COVID being one of them, but we're also in flu season in the fall. We're
Yeah.
also, there's colds in the winter. And so let's just kind of be general about this to say first,
Okay.
how do we actually raise the shields overall? Blueberries, by the way, is an excellent way of raising our immunity while lowering inflammation, because infections that we get from viruses will cause not only the organism to get into our body, but it causes inflammation. So blueberries, just a fistful of blueberries a day in the morning, however you have it, is
Yeah.
a great way to actually get stronger. In fact, it's been shown even in athletes, it
Yeah.
improves their immune system. Now,
And
here's
I have a hack, a
okay,
blueberry
please.
hack.
Yeah.
So I have blueberries every day. I love them. But I highly recommend looking for organic frozen blueberries. And if you have frozen in the refrigerator, you can use them in smoothies, everything. And even sometimes I just put them, frozen ones in a little cup and stuck on the frozen berries. Yummy with a little bit of the chocolate, by the way, is like a great dessert treat that is perfect. But frozen blueberries, organic, in the freezer all the time, you're good.
What a great suggestion, Norma. And by the way, here's the other thing that people should know about frozen foods. When it comes to the polyphenols that are really good, that activate your body's health defenses, improve your metabolism, most of the frozen foods that you would actually get really have their nutrients preserved. And the reason is they're picked and flash frozen.
Frozen, yeah.
And actually they're locked in. You talked about the fridge. They're locked in a way even fresher than transported them and put them in a plane.
And they're dying. They're dying. So by the time they get to whatever your favorite stores, and they're dying on these tables,
pallets, yeah.
it's like they're just dying every day, and just getting them flash frozen, like you said, it's
If you have a farmer's market, you'll find blueberries come out in the summer, and they're picked fresh, and they don't travel very far.
No,
So you actually
that's different.
Yeah. But the frozen blueberry hack, the organic one, is a phenomenal tip. Organic, more the good stuff, because it's more grown in nature. It's flash frozen, so the nutrients are locked in, and they're also less expensive. So you can actually have them more affordable for everyone.
A lot. Yeah, I use them for everything. They're really great. Yeah. So, what can you? So on the COVID thing, then, basically do the teas and all of the things you talked about, because that's what now is in everybody's pantry, and they're going to just be fortified by what they have in the house, and stay away from sugars that are obviously not healthy, and some sugars in dried fruits are a little intense and maybe not so great.
Yeah, no, listen, we started this podcast talking about, we wanted to talk about good things, but, you had said, what about the things that get removed, to leave the good things? Well, look, let's talk about that, what we were talking about in, protecting yourself from infection.
Yeah.
It turns out that many of the harmful things, the things that are not so good, the things that you don't really want in your house, if you snack on them outside once in a while, go for it. But spend most of your time building up your defenses. You can take a hit every now and then. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: added sugar, artificial preservatives, artificial coloring, artificial flavoring, these ultra processed products that you find in so many foods, that all you have to do is look at the ingredient label on the side of the box or the bag, and it will reveal itself to you. You don't want to have those, because they've been shown to lower your defenses, lower your immunity. And the way that it does this is by picking off your gut microbiome. These substances, including artificial sweeteners, not just added sugar, but even aspartame, saccharin, all those kind of things, they kill our healthy gut bacteria. And by the way, remember we talked about the gut bacteria makes your brain release all these social hormones. Is it
Yeah.
any wonder why if you eat a lot of sugar, you're just in a bad mood, crappy
Yeah.
mood. You're not feeling good,
Totally.
right?
Well,
Your brain's changed.
yeah. And,
So,
and, and the question is, you talk about Halloween candy and Halloween's coming up and we're poisoning all of these kids that are coming around. Like, it's terrible that parents aren't just protesting
you know what
universally.
you know what would be great, and maybe you and I will hatch this as an idea. You know how they did the ice bucket challenge for LS?
Yeah.
We should actually do a Halloween challenge and find health. Challenge people to give away healthy foods for Halloween for the neighborhood,
Yeah.
because we're all sending a message that there are better choices to be made by the grown-ups that actually teach kids what's good for you.
So let's get some suggestions. So if some kids are coming to your house, what would you have ready for them?
I think tree nuts, little bags of tree nuts, like or trail mix. Got to check it carefully. It doesn't
Yeah.
actually have lots of additives and stuff in there, sugar. I think if we could find small giveaway packs of like the kind of stuff they give you on an airplane,
Yeah.
that's actually a good way to put something in that they can snack on, and it's tasty. Same thing, little bags of dried fruit that aren't sweetened.
Raisins and
Raisins, cranberries. They even have little things of blueberries now, little packets. That's a way of conveying that sweetness, that little sweet hit that people want, but also having something that is giving more good stuff to their body. We probably don't send that message strongly enough, which is, that dried fruits, when they're properly done and not eating too much of it, it's a wonderful way to actually build gut health as well.
Yeah. And figs and dates are, they have nutritional value.
Yeah.
And again,
dried figs.
Dried figs, amazing. Cutting them up and putting them into salads is really great. But I think kids really, I make, sweet potato ice cream and without cream and blueberry ice cream. And I do it with almond milk and, just whip it up and create this thing. You put it in the freezer and put stuff on it. And kids, when they don't know, if you say it's ice cream and it tastes really good and you have nuts and goodies on top, even little crumpled pieces of chocolate, it's just changing sort of the amount of sugar they're experiencing, the type of sugar.
Right. 100%.
Critical. Yeah. So what is a longevity hack you feel is probably the most important that you can think of right now?
I can think of a couple of them. I will start with one fundamental one, and I'll go to a food one. I think staying physically active is very, very important. Take the stairs instead of the elevator, depending on how far up you live. Go for a walk after dinner every day. You don't need to work out. You have a trainer, go to the gym. If you just took 30 minutes after dinner and walked around the block or even around your house, that over the decades actually pays itself off, because use it or lose it, we need our muscles to be strong as we get older. That's one of the things that happens. And as people age, as their muscles start to get thinner and weaker, keep them up. And you need protein along with that as well. The other thing I would say is really kind of talked about coffee, slowing down cellular aging. Anything you can do to kind of slow down that natural process is good. It's kind of adds seconds, minutes, hours, and months to your life. Look, that's every little bit counts. And then I'll tell you a little hack that I actually use myself. Skip a few meals every week. Skip a breakfast a couple of times a week. Skip a lunch a couple of times a week. If you have enough, you can even skip a dinner. And the reason is caloric restriction. And I'm not really hardcore biohacking about percent, But you know what? Honestly, if you don't feel like you need to eat breakfast, skip it.
Yeah.
Why is that good for aging? Well, decreasing the amount of calories allows your metabolism to reset and the program for aging to reset itself. Every little bit where you just unpack, unload that engine allows you to reserve a little bit more energy and spring back to be a little bit more youthful. So not a big deal. Listen, when I was training in medical school, Norma, I can't tell you the number of breakfasts I'd skip because I was just too much in a hurry.
Yeah.
Right. Or I'm sure, listen, in your world, you've been so busy. I'm sure
Selection time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I actually, if anybody listening, wants the recipe to nut seed bread, that's one of my, hacks, because what I'll do is I'm so busy during the day, and, I'll have maybe a smoothie in the morning or a coffee or tea. But then I'll have 2 slices of the nut seed bread, and it's so filling that that's all I'll have until maybe I have sardines, that bit of sardines. And I feel completely full. I don't feel hungry. And, I think nut seed bread is a great way to eat a little bit and get enough sort of satisfaction and not stress out your digestion by having a meal for lunch and breakfast. And it's like too much, but a little bit. And there's psyllium husk in there. So it's great to keep you regular, and sort of another thing that's really helpful. I agree with you on not being strict about it, but using your judgment on. So how often do you think you kind of skip meals in a week?
I skip probably, I would say 2 or 3 times. I'm not an enforcer about it. It's kind of natural to me. Depends on my schedule. I often, when the meal I skip is breakfast, a lot of times it gives my body a little extra time overnight to reset my metabolism, get my gut and my immune system in shape. And I don't notice it. The key, if you're actually skipping a meal, is not to overeat afterwards.
Right. But I think what happens is doing it a few times becomes, comfortable, and then you've already know what that experience is like, and that it's not so difficult to do. I'm so thrilled. This was great and so informative. And if you want to give us some final statement about what you're doing, or something that is really out of the box that you've been exploring, we would love to hear it. And again, this has been so much fun. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been a real pleasure, Norma. It's an honor to be on your podcast. And people who are interested in learning more about the work I do in food as medicine, please come to my website, drdrwilliamlee.com. That's my handle as well, Dr. William Lee. I offer free master classes. I do all kinds of social postings of when I'm traveling, when I'm doing research, practical stuff that I want people to see, how I do it. And if I can share a little bit of my practices that, you might resonate with, that's part of my mission. And then for people that are really ready to kind of make a commitment, I teach an online course. It's called Eat to Beat Disease course. It's a deep dive for a month. You can find it on my website or my social. But listen, my whole thing is to be able to convince people that science is teaching us you can love your food to love your health at the same time.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. This has been incredible. I'm so happy that we had this time together, and I'm sure everybody has been taking notes, as I have been. And this is such practical good sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.